The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Big Ben Haslar presiding. Will your order is for the Honorable Judge Haslar. Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today we are hearing the case of the People versus Skyfall. Skyfall is a 2012 Sam Mendes-directed James Bond film starring Daniel Craig as Agent 007, who must track down a culprit behind the recent attacks targeting M, the head of the secret intelligence agency MI6. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Bailiff, please pass out the martinis to the jury and Mr. Andre Shane. You are appearing on behalf of the prosecution. You may begin your opening statement.
Delicious.
Thank you very much. Esteemed gentlemen of the Reels of Justice Court, I, first of all, thank you all for allowing me to prosecute the cinematic crimes of Skyfall from 2012, directed, as you said, by Sam Mendes and starring Daniel Craig as James Bond, Judi Dench as M, and Javier Bardem as Silva. First, I want to say that since I was small, a 12-year-old boy, I saw my very first Bond film on television. I've been a devoted Bond fanatic ever since. I read all the Fleming novels, short stories, many post-Fleming ones, seen every film a dozen times, collected books, toys, paraphernalia. I own those little Funko figurines of Roger Moore. And I even wrote my first, not my first, actually my final film school thesis on the James Bond movies in college. So I'm a diehard fanatic for sure. But as is the case with that very first James Bond film that I watched on ABC TV as a kid, a little movie called The Man with a Golden Gun, probably the very worst film in the series that I can think of. As a grown-up film consumer, I try to balance my love of James Bond with a clear-eyed understanding that sometimes the individual films are just not very good. And that brings me to our defendant, Skyfall. Now, I accept the fact that as far as Daniel Craig Bond film, Skyfall is regarded as one of his finest outings, right? Second maybe to Casino Royale. However, gentlemen of the court, I assert to you now that in spite of some good scenes, beautiful cinematography by the great Roger Deakins, and some pretty good acting, Skyfall is in fact an illogical, contrived, and incredibly stupid movie. Today, I intend to prove beyond all doubt that the makers of Skyfall created a film that relentlessly insults its audience's intelligence and betrays its own characters in ways that one scene is impossible to ignore. Today, Skyfall will indeed fall from its lofty pedestal of high regard and be confined to the spot it rightly belongs, at the bottom of the franchise barrel, right next to The Man with a Golden Gun.
Oh!
Thank you, Mr. Shane. Mr. Robb Maynard, you are representing the defense.
Yes, I am.
Please present your opening statement, sir.
Your Honor, distinguished gentlemen of the jury, what in the hell are we doing here? Seriously, what in the sweet name of Desmond Llewellyn's ghost are we doing here? Are we seriously putting Skyfall on trial right now for being a bad movie? That's insane! Surely my esteemed colleague here must be confusing it with 2015 Spectre. That's the only explanation I can come up with for this injustice. Like, hello, Earth to Mr. Shane, Earth to Mr. Shane. Skyfall is the good one. It's easily the most visually beautiful and thoughtfully composed Bond film of all time. Frankly, it's better than any Bond film has the right to be. Someone probably should have told Sam Mendes, hey, Sam, you know, this is the same silly franchise where a man kills people by throwing hats at them, right? You don't have to work this hard. Because, seriously, this film is almost too good to be in this franchise. So again, I ask, what in the fuck are we doing here? Thank you.
All right. Mr. Shane, you are prosecuting Skyfall, just to be sure.
Yes, sir. I believe I am.
All right. Well, then you may present your first piece of evidence.
All right. Gentlemen, I'm going to begin with Exhibit 1, which is false and inconsistent character behaviors. First of all, Bond has in one film gone from a new and impetuous young 007 to an over-the-hill dinosaur in one movie. Let's forget how he managed to survive that unbelievable fall from the bridge. Nobody could live through that, falling like on your neck the way he did. Impossible to survive, even for James Bond. Even Captain America would be killed by a fall like that. But what I want to know is what is he doing on the beach, and where is this beach exactly? Is he still in Turkey? Can somebody explain the scorpion game? How does that work when he drinks from a scorpion and there seems to be like the locals are very excited by this? What is going on there? Can anybody
objection, Your Honor. So I don't know that it's clearly stated out. I assume the beach to be in Mexico, but Bond is basically after falling off the aforementioned bridge and miraculously surviving. Granted, I would say it was the power of Adele's theme song that kept him going.
I think I saw it on Ripley's Believe It or Not once.
You know, he's entered some. I assume it was Mexico because there's the scorpion drinking game just kind of feels like a game you might play down there, like swallowing the worm, except it's take a shot before scorpion can sting you. But
how can that be monetized?
I mean,
to be waving money around.
Well, clearly there's people who bet on the drinker and people who bet on the scorpion, and so I think it's very profitable. I'm not saying I'd play the game, but I'd bet on the scorpion. I can tell you that much.
Here would play that game.
I would not. No.
Well, James Bond would. It doesn't matter if we would.
Absolutely.
That's true. Well, you know, I really don't understand what's going on in his little vacation from life over there. And I also don't understand why it takes him like a year to dig out that bullet from his shoulder, which apparently is constantly giving him pain. You know, he didn't do that until he got back. And like, I don't understand, like, did he not have access to like a pocket knife or something like that? What how did that work out? But okay.
Objection, Your Honor. I would say that he was keeping the bullet. I don't think it bothered him as much as we thought. It was just shrapnel. It wasn't a bullet, but it was fragments of the bullet that hit him that came from the assassin he was fighting in the opening scene on top of the train. And I'd say if it wasn't bothering him much, he had no reason to dig it out. The reason he eventually digs it out is to track down said assassin later. So
does he not like push at his wound though every so often?
I can't recall seeing that. He might have.
He seemed to be severely bothered by that impact. He touched it.
I mean,
in the scene with.
I agree with you. A normal man would have dug the shrapnel out and put it in a little baggie for use as evidence later. But this is James Bond. This is James Bond, and he's going to keep it in the safest place possible, which is in his flesh.
The only other thing that really bugged me about the Bond thing was that when he ordered that martini at the Macau market, he said perfect when she delivered him the martini, and it was half empty. It's embarrassing. James Bond would never.
I agree with that. That's true. That's
speaking of half empty martinis, Judge, can I get another?
Yes, bailiff, one more round on me, and then the rest is on you.
Thank you. Moneypenny. Okay, Moneypenny's introduced here to the Craig regime. She was never a field operative before in the Bond universe, but here she's a field operative, right? Except she's terrible at it. She friggin' almost kills James Bond. And like she's got a lot of attitude, but like she's just not super competent. So I don't get the logic here. It's almost like the producers are going, okay, let's bring Moneypenny into the 21st century and make her like an action woman, and then kind of make her a clown, and then fire her, and then basically chase her right back to the desk job where she belongs.
That's a fair point.
It
Mr. Maynard, would you like to address that?
Well, what I would say is that I don't think she got chased back to the desk job. I think in this timeline, Moneypenny starts as a field operative, and apparently not a very good one, and that's what makes her become like sort of an executive assistant, right? Now we don't know if the former Moneypenny of the Sean Connery and Roger Moore fame was ever a field operative, and we don't know how competent she might have been, or incompetent she might have been. So we never saw that. But in this universe, Moneypenny, who's a distinctly new character, was a field agent before she became an executive assistant. Not a particularly good one.
But she doesn't grow within the franchise. She goes right back to where she is at the beginning.
My point is it where she is? Like, I don't know if she goes back. I don't think she was an assistant that became a field operative that became an assistant. Like, she's not in Casino Royale and Quantum, right? He meets her in Skyfall. So he meets her for the first time as a field agent.
Right. We don't even know her name for most of the movie. He
doesn't even know her name, which is strange, because I wouldn't let a woman who I don't know their name shave me.
Not normally, you know what I mean? Like,
well,
even if I don't
you're not Mr. James Bond. That's what separates you from the wheat from the chaff, sir.
Well, maybe it's just like, did it never come up before? It's like, oh, by the way, my name. It is strange, but like I said, I don't think she was an assistant who they let be a field operative and then got busted down to an assistant. She was a field agent initially. She probably came out of the school like that. She wasn't a particularly good one, and she decided to take a desk job. So that's supposed to be like the origin of Moneypenny in this timeline.
That is true.
Okay. Mr. Shane, your next piece of evidence?
I will talk about the character of Silva, whose only motivation seems to be revenge against M. Let me ask you a question. Why doesn't he just break into her apartment like James Bond does like twice during the Daniel Craig era and just shoot her? This incredibly convoluted plot is completely unnecessary, and his motivation and actions in the final act are utterly ridiculous. Why would he sabotage his victory just to murder an old lady who's basically been already fired? I mean, he won. Why did he need to murder an old lady? I don't get it. It really bothers me, and I think it's one of the stupidest aspects of the film. And finally, M in this film, and this is another, I'm not going to call myself a feminist, guys, but I feel like this movie treats its women pretty shabbily. Like, M in this movie is completely incompetent. Like, every decision she makes is bad. Shoot Bond because she's not sure he can beat up some random thug in a fist fight. Seriously, this was her decision? It's James fucking Bond. What was she thinking? and the MI6 building blows up. Let's move the whole British intelligence into an old, barely secured underground location from like the early 20th century. Check. Send Bond on a dangerous mission after he's failed both physical and mental tests. I mean, he's apparently a drug addict in this movie, guys. Did you catch that? He's a drug addict. And she let him go in the field. And it's like in Skyfall, like Judi Dench's M is just, she's such a moron, and I just feel like it's after 6 films of reliable competence and faith in her agents and kind of general coolness, she's not treated very well by this script. And I mean, when they have her like reciting poetry during her parliamentary hearings, that's just insane. Like, is that what they do in England? They recite poetry while they're about to get fired? It's so strange.
Yes.
I
love Judi Dench. I do. She's great. She's
Dame
great as
Judi Dench.
Sam. She's Dame. She's a dame. But I think this is a rather pathetic ending to a great character that she created in GoldenEye, and I don't know. It kind of makes me sad.
Your rebuttal to the character of M.
I don't consider M incompetent. I do consider M callous. M in this film especially, it's really shown that she's basically like Amanda Waller from like Suicide Squad. She is incredibly mercenary. She has no problem with considering agents disposable. So when it's like shoot Bond, it's like it's not shoot Bond, it's take the risk of maybe hitting Bond in order to stop that terrorist who has a list of like every United Nations undercover agent. So like you're potentially risking Bond's life to save 20, 30, 50, 200. I don't know how many names were on the list, but it's a lot more than one.
Sure.
And so she makes that decision of I'm willing to risk Bond's life for this. It's worth it. Which is callous, but also probably pragmatically the right decision. And it's unfortunately Moneypenny's just a real shit shot. And M seems bummed about it after she misses. She seems like I made the wrong call. And
But it was the wrong call, though. It definitely was.
It may have been. If I was in M's boots, I probably would have made the same call because it's at least you have. Because M couldn't see the shot. So it's like, do you have a 50-50 shot of hitting him? Like, what is it here? Like, I really need you to stop that dude. You know what's really stupid is after Moneypenny misses and hits Bond, why doesn't she shoot again? Like, why doesn't she shoot him now? Like, dude's still on the train. She has time to make another shot.
Because she has to do a dramatic double take to the camera.
Exactly. So if anything, Moneypenny is incredibly incompetent. I think they show M to be really ruthless. And of course, she is brought up on parliamentary charges. So the film is like, yeah, M's not that great. Even the film sort of frames it as that.
Absolutely. She's basically in the
What about her letting Bond, who's a narcotic and can't shoot a person unless he's like 10 feet away from them, into the field?
You know, I took that as like, she understands that those tests can't tell you shit, right? Like, and it's actually shown later too in the gun range scene, right, where Silva gives Bond an armed gun to make a shot to try to shoot a shot glass off of the attractive Bond girl, and Bond misses, maybe on purpose, maybe not, and you know, and Silva's like, is there any of the old 007 left? And then Bond proceeds to like whoop all 5 armed dudes' ass. Like, you know, he may not be able to pass a field test, but he can get his job done. And M, I think, was so desperate that she knew these tests are wrong, that you can send this man to the field and he'll get his job done. And she was right about that, right? Like, she sent Bond in the field and he never died.
That is true. He never does.
Well, he has no time to, Mr. Maynard.
It's true.
Mr. Shane, what's your next exhibit?
Well, I think as far as the sad treatment of women in this movie, this Savarine character, and I don't even know where to begin with her. I think she's like my favorite female character in Skyfall, and maybe actually she's my favorite character, period, in Skyfall. And she gets so totally mistreated, again, by the narrative. It's not... Well, I mean, like, I like her story arc. You know, she starts out kind of creepy, and then he kind of melts the ice during their little conversation and hits upon her sad, like, human traffic past. So you feel kind of bad for her. And next thing is, he climbs into the shower with her. That is the creepiest fucking Bond moment since Roger Moore, like, trick raped Solitaire in Live and Let Die. I mean, she seems to be, and also later on during the scene you just mentioned, she's basically following Silva's plan. She's Silva's henchwoman. Am I wrong? I mean, she's there. Yeah. She brings him in. She serves as an intermediary, and then she entices him to come and, you know, climb into her shower, apparently, on the boat, which he does. And then
and I think objection. He just clarified it. She enticed him to come into the shower. She invites him along on the boat to meet her at the dock. She showers. I don't know if she was expecting him to show up at that time, but she is expecting him. So, I mean, he didn't force himself on her like
be there. Well, you know,
it is very Bond move.
It's very Bond move.
But Bond in the 60s, you know, nothing
true. Fair point.
And also, she was a character, like, again, I felt bad for her because she was so heavily used, and it really brought me back to some of the worst elements of the James Bond era, of the Roger Moore era, actually. the early couple of Roger Moore eras, they try to cover the fact that Roger Moore is kind of soft by having Roger Moore be like really nasty to women, and eventually I think Roger Moore himself was like, hey, this is not. Like Roger Moore talked like a dude from Chicago. I don't know why. I don't know if you guys knew that.
Hey, I'm Roger Moore.
I'm not gonna smack her around like you want me to. You know what I'm saying? No, but Roger Moore didn't talk like that. But he did kind of say that. And this scene reminded me of that era in a very uncomfortable way. But like taking her back to the way she's killed in the film, I think like her character is discarded in such a horrible way. And this is a little bit of a pattern with Craig films, because in Quantum of Solace, what's his name? The French guy, the Italian actor, but the guy he threw in the garbage, Mathis.
Yeah.
Remember that character?
Yeah.
He kind of discarded, that character was discarded in a very kind of, not just unceremonious, but like disrespectful manner, and I felt like this character was just like, why did he have to kill her? She was one of his hench people. Like, what did she do that she deserves to get beaten up? I never understood that.
You have a rebuttal to the use of the Bond girl in this film, Mr. Maynard?
I mean, I think, we're conflating the way that Silva and Bond both treat her. And Silva absolutely discards her. He calls her obsolete or unnecessary or something like that. She had a purpose, which was, I'm certain, pleasure for a while. She was like a rescued like sex worker at something. Like she was like a sex slave somewhere, and he rescued her. And I don't know what purpose she was serving prior to this, but clearly her only position here was to lure Bond to the island. And once that was done, either she was just killed because he didn't need her anymore, but there also is lots of undertones that he's upset with her for sleeping with Bond, that maybe wasn't part of the plan, right? There's a lot of jabs they have in that scene where they kill her, that he's kind of betrayed and upset and insecure. So Silva treats her nasty. No one's disagreeing with that, but he is the bad guy, so he should treat her nasty. As far as Bond, Bond has always used women to get his information, right? What, as M would say, I think in the prior films, pump her for information. He's using his sex appeal to get the information he needs to solve the crime. But he doesn't like to see harm come to her. And while he does have the witty line after she's killed, "Bloody waste of scotch," he is visibly bothered by the fact that she's been clearly beaten and is now going to be murdered. And he can't bring himself to try to shoot the shot glass off her head, because I think he knows he'll miss, or he misses intentionally. But I don't think Bond wants to see her die or anything like that. It's just, that's Silva's fault. Silva kills her. What can Bond do besides try to stop Silva?
But narratively, you don't think it's a little short with this character?
It is, and that's a Bond trope. There are Bond girls who don't last long. They're usually there to get killed. And she, unfortunately, is a name on that list. She is someone who fell for Bond, and that instantly made whatever her prior lover was insecure, and then murder ends up being their comeuppance. I'm not defending that. I'm not saying we should, murder the women that we love and sleep with someone else. That's a bad guy thing to do. That's what the bad guys do. That's what they do to prove they're really bad. Like Silva didn't do anything really bad until he did that. That's when he's done something really bad. And you're like, oh, this dude's shitty. And that's what the movie, this franchise uses women as pawns in that position all the time. But what I would like to say about Severine is she is the first Bond girl. But what's interesting about Skyfall is there is no other Bond girl besides M, right? Like he doesn't get another girl after this. Usually he reloads and he gets another chick after the first one is killed, and they don't in this movie. He basically follows around M, and M dies in his arms. So unless you count Moneypenny, who shaves him at the beginning, and they kind of have a little tryst, I assume. The Bond girl of Skyfall is M. And I think that's a really interesting point.
Hashtag feminism.
All right. I cannot argue with that point.
Do you have any further exhibits, Mr. Shane?
I have two two further exhibits, Your Honor.
Very good.
My exhibit 2 focuses on ridiculous plot machinations and unconvincing contrivances. Bond self-surgery, we already talked about the self-surgery, but I'll bring it up again because theoretically, the shrapnel was some kind of a radioactive substance that only 6 people in the world use, one of whom was the guy that that Bond was fighting on top of the train with at the beginning of the movie. That is unbelievably contrived. For him to dig out that thing and to find that guy through a radioactive shrapnel. Now, gentlemen, I'm not insisting that James Bond movies are going to be realistic or anything like that. I don't believe that. I think they should just have an internal logic, and when they take incredible logical leaps, there should be something more there. I found the bullet thing to be really, really contrived, but not as contrived as Silva's whole plan, which is basically built entirely on predicting precisely the actions of dozens of strangers in a way that they could never really be predicted. And I find that really unconvincing. And the film doesn't really respect our intelligence enough to show us some of the details of what happens. It just skips over the parts. They plug in his computer, right? And the computer opens the doors. So next thing you know, Silva's murdered 2 like highly trained guards who, like, when the doors started opening, apparently were taking a shit or something because he killed them easily and ran out of the entire facility without any problem. And all of that was predicated on some degree of timing. Like, how did he know that they were going to plug into his laptop, which incidentally is also stupid because they would have never done that. But you know what I mean?
Objection. I disagree. I disagree that they'd plug in the laptop. Let's back up slightly because the first part of Silva's plan is to lure Bond to the island and basically allow himself to be captured and arrested.
Yes.
And where they bring him to not the new MI6 building, but the underground bunker, right? Which means that even a step before in his plan was to attack the new MI6 building, knowing they'll retreat into this bunker. Right. So that's the first thing is he knows that's MI6 protocol. That's where they're going to retreat to. Like those Churchill tunnels, I think they talk about them.
Right.
And so he knows they're going to go there. And that's the thing. Silva knows everything MI6 is going to do because he's a former agent. And that's why his plan is so important. It was brought up earlier. Why doesn't he break into M's apartment and shoot her? It's so important to Silva to publicly kill her at that parliamentary hearing. It's so important to rub Bond's face in it and M's face in it that he's smarter than them, that she was wrong to give him up, and that he's the best agent living. There are egotistical Bond villains, but Silva is right up there at the top of the list. He has got to not only does he know how smart he is, you need to know how smart he is. And so, that next part of that plan, he knows that if he has a computer, that Q is going to plug it in. And it makes sense. I mean, if Q needs to access it, and they assume Silva's safe behind bars, they didn't assume he was going to have that program. So I think that's him being a step ahead of them to plugging in that computer. I think he did know that they were going to do that.
Well,
he's lucky they did.
Your Honor, clearly he knew they were going to do that, but that's just predicated on a lot of just script contrivances, knowing. Did he know that they were going to plug it in at precisely the time that would time out with him walking out, the train crashing, and the parliamentary hearing taking place at the same time? All of that is contrived to be all part of a plan. But how could a plan like that really exist? It can't because it's predicated on too many variables. So a lot of movies do this kind of stuff, especially movies where the villain gets captured, like in The Dark Knight, and it's always a little bit questionable. But I think that this particular plot gets into really, really fantastical land because the payoff is so low. I mean, he's literally just trying to kill an old woman, and this is weird. I mean, this to me is it's such a low stakes plot for Silva himself, right? I mean, you're saying he wants to prove his IQ and stuff like that, but he's willing to commit suicide in the process? His life seems to be so good before that.
I don't know about his life being good. That cyanide, I think,
It
it's
messed him up, man.
not only does it do a lot of damage to his face, we have to assume it's done a lot of stuff to his insides. He is, you know, almost basically a ghost himself. And when you talk about someone who betrayed him to death, the stakes are incredible. And that's what I like about this movie. The stakes are lower than most Bond movies. Most Bond movies, the bad guy wants to take over the world or hold a country hostage for billions, get a nuclear weapon and threaten millions of lives. And Silva only wants to assassinate one person. He just wants to assassinate M. And that is so grounded in reality and relatable. And yet the stakes are so low for us, but they're so high for M, they're so high for Bond, they're so high for Silva, that while they're very grounded reality lowered stakes, they still keep you engaged and interested. I do want to respond to the timing. We don't know that his program would only trigger once it was plugged in, right? Because they were plugged in for a few minutes and looking at it. I think Silva probably had a timing thing. Let's say at 3:00, this needs to trigger because I know she has a parliamentary hearing at maybe 4, right? And because he got ready, he was stretching. He knew the time was coming. So he had to assume that they would plug in the computer any time before that. Maybe 10 minutes before, maybe 2 hours before. But that as long as he was captured.
It cost them nothing to show that, though, on the screen. To give us
show
that
what?
clue.
Him with a little watch?
Or something?
If a timer showed up on the screen, they know something was up, Your Honor. They couldn't. They had to obscure that. As long as Silva
looking at his watch. How about that?
He doesn't have a watch. They took it. I don't think he has one.
I'll stop playing prosecutor and let Mr. Shane do his job.
Exactly. He's an invisible. There's one of those clear cell things. So he probably doesn't have a watch. So I don't know how he exactly knew what time it was. So that's a good question. But he did seemingly know when the time was coming up. I don't know what he did about the 2 guards. That's a decent point. But I do think that he would be able to rely on Q plugging in the computer and Q doing that within some 12-hour window before his timed procedure would go off. That's the way I took it.
Well, clearly there was a machination in his mind of how it would work. But I mean, think about it, like the plugging in the computer. Like, how could he be sure that that Q would be stupid enough to plug in the computer that is connected to their mainframe? That's not how forensics are done on bad guys' computers. That you don't plug them into your system and let them take your system down. Second of all, the trigger, the program that set off the trigger, all it seemed to do was open all the doors. That's all it did. It's not like stuff started blowing up. So, okay, all the doors open. Silva's door opens. These 2 giant bruisers guarding it would beat the shit out of his crippled ass, and that would be the end of
I
the
don't
door.
know about that.
Well, theoretically, I mean, all it was the doors, and yet somehow he manages to escape the entire facility, murder a couple of people who are also standing there seeing the door open suddenly, and so one would imagine they were prepared, but okay, we'll skip past that. But I found that very, very hard to believe. And also the ending of the film, when they go to Skyfall, I find it kind of weird that he would choose to go there. It makes thematic sense from a dramatic perspective. Oh, and now he goes to his family home and you'll hear about his, backstory. The least necessary thing for James Bond, right? The backstory. Nobody in the right mind cares about Bond's backstory because it's not important. He's a fantasy figure. He doesn't have a backstory. He sort of represents our own fantasies of being male that stem from the 1950s by an old British guy. But you understand what I'm saying? So I don't know. I don't like the Skyfall twist. I find it ridiculous that he would go there because such an obvious place. And if you say it's a trap that he was setting for Silva, it's the world's worst trap, right? Like him and 2 80-years-olds. What kind of a trap is that? Silva's got an army of mercenaries. And
objection, Your Honor. One of those 80-year-olds is Scottish.
That's true. We do have very proud Scottish heritage in this courtroom.
And a great actor. God bless him. Albert
Finney.
Finney.
Thank you. Oh, you meant the guy.
I love Albert Finney.
All right, Mr. Maynard, do you have rebuttal to the showdown at Skyfall?
The showdown at Skyfall it could be just a little too reminiscent of Home Alone for me a bit. Like when they're all there's a montage of them all setting up booby traps around the house. And I kind of wish Carol of the Bells had been playing under it. Cause it would have been perfect. But ultimately, if you're trying to retreat somewhere and you're going to fortify said stronghold from invaders or outside attackers, and you don't have a lot of weapons, then booby traps are logically like an effective method. They only had like 1 or 2 guns, and they couldn't do much against this sort of armed, I wouldn't call it an army, maybe a battalion or a strike team for sure.
Strike team. It was like 10 guys he had with him, plus a gunship that he himself had. The gunship is so powerful, man. You could take
the gunship was powerful. They obviously knew how to stay inside enough where it couldn't get them. So, and the other thing is, I think Silva's strength is also his greatest weakness. He's arrogant. And although he doesn't fall into the trap that most Bond villains have of actually explaining his whole plan to Bond, that's another thing I love about Skyfall. He never actually sits down and explains what he's going to do to Bond, like every other villain does.
He says he's going to kill him, and that's his plan.
It doesn't make sense if you try to explain it.
He never says how. Yeah, he never says how, though, Your Honor. But he doesn't explain that. A lot of them like to explain. Here's 1, 2, and 3. Aren't I so clever? Silva just decides to surprise them. But his weakness is his arrogance, right? Is his ego? Is thinking that he's outsmarted Bond. He underestimates Bond over and over through the movie, and that is his undoing, right? I mean, he calls James a physical wreck. Multiple times, he asks, is there anything left of the old 007? Did you really die that day? So he would like a challenge from Bond, but he doesn't think Bond is a challenge for him. So his arrogance is his undoing. So when he attacks Skyfall with his helicopter and his 10 guys, he's so confident he has Bond right where he wants him. He doesn't know Bond's going to actually blow up his old house to cover his escape. It's not something that even occurred to Silva. And everything that happens, I'd say, after the parliamentary assassination, that is Silva's plan has failed, right? And he is making everything up on the fly, right? Like I find out Bond is off in the Scottish Highlands. Let me rent or steal a helicopter. Let me find 20 dudes and get them out there. It's very thrown together. It's not the sort of master plan Silva would like to use. He's just a villain trying to make it work, just trying to get out there.
Yeah, I Your Honor, I would counter by saying that I still think the Skyfall gambit is completely ridiculous. Whether Bond believes, let's take it from Bond's perspective, whether Bond believes that he's going to a safe place to hide, or whether he believes that he's setting a trap, both of those beliefs seem to be incredibly dumb. And I do want to mention an element that was kind of annoying to me now. Skyfall was a 50th anniversary film in the James Bond franchise, the Eon James Bond franchise. And so the kind of the pointless fan fondling was really annoying to me. I love the crocodile walk from Live and Let Die, right? Everybody loves when he walks across the crocodile. I mean, that thing with the Komodo dragons, the digital Komodo dragons, the unconvincing digital Komodo dragons, that was kind of weak. And like, okay, the car, whose car is that? Whose fucking car is that? It's like, I love it. Yeah, but he got an Aston Martin in Casino Royale. Remember, that car turned over, so he lost that one. Whose car is this with the ejector seat?
He got another car. Your Honor, he got another car. Objection.
He got a car with an ejector seat from the 60s.
It's useful. Clearly.
It comes in sustained. That is that's Bond trope 101.
Yeah, and I would like to say, if I could continue that objection, that just because we see Craig at Casino Royale, basically where he gets his this was something brought up in the prosecution earlier, where he gets his 00 status. And now Skyfall is the third movie. Doesn't mean this is Bond's third mission, right? This is clearly an end-of-the-line Bond we see in Skyfall, and we can assume he's had many missions between getting his 00 status and Skyfall, and possibly even prior to getting his 00 status, prior to Casino Royale. He had to be some kind of field agent doing murders to earn his 00 status. So at any point in any of those missions, he could have gotten a DB5 with an ejector seat. You know, maybe it's his personal car. That's what I took it. It's his personal car. He makes money. He clearly doesn't spend it on his apartment. He picked out a sweet ass DB5, and he put an ejector seat because you never know when they come in handy. So
I would like to have one myself. Your point is well taken. Mr. Shane, do you have any last arguments to bring forth?
I just want to say that overall, outside of the ridiculous plot, the characters that don't act like themselves all of a sudden, and just truly deeply contrived machinations that don't make any sense, I just find it sort of reflects the Craig era for me, which is the producers want like a good, new, rugged, modern James Bond, but they want the old fantasy James Bond too. So to me, Skyfall is the most guilty of that to a certain point. Not as guilty as Spectre after it, which is truly a bad movie, unlike this one. But they throw they throw in the old Bond signifiers without any concern for story integrity or internal logic. It's kind of shameless pandering to the fans that's kind of annoying. And overall, the entire Craig regime to me is like, I just want to put to rest the theory that Daniel Craig somehow represents the truest screen portrayal of Ian Fleming's 007. It's total bullshit. I'm convinced that whoever believes this nonsense has never read an actual Fleming novel. Fleming's Bond isn't angry. He's not manic depressive. He is not a charmless thug who murders people in cold blood, literally, and throws his dead comrades into the garbage can. Fleming's Bond is not like that. And at the end of the day, I can forgive the modern reinterpretation. But what I can't forgive is like a film that consistently insults my intelligence while patting itself on the back for its own cleverness. I think Skyfall is a turkey wrapped in a pretty packaging, all surface, hollow on the inside. I don't think it's a good movie. And I'm not a big fan of that gun barrel thing at the very end of the film too. That never really rubbed me the wrong way. And the one that Craig does is so fast. He runs out there like the thing can barely keep up with him, right? He runs way ahead of it, shoots really fast. It ends up in this really awkward pose, like next to like Connery almost stumbling on his shaky knee for that one. It's probably like the worst gun barrel in the series. I rest my case.
All right, the prosecution has rested. Mr. Maynard, what are your exhibits?
I do want to rebut one of those final points. Hollowed out turkey is delicious because that's how we put stuffing inside.
The court sustains this.
Thank you, Your Honor. I knew you would.
Damn it!
You know, I won't drag out too much because a lot of this stuff has been touched on. I do think that the Craig era really is sort of the Christopher Nolan Batman series of James Bond, right? Like if Casino Royale is Batman Begins, Skyfall is The Dark Knight. You know, even down to the Joker, you know, being intentionally captured, Silva's intentionally captured. You know, it's kind of the smarter, more artistic one of the series. And it's just gorgeous. You know, to talk about some of these scenes, I mean, there's this early scene in the film where Bond has tailed an assassin named Patrice, who is out on a hit, and he's setting up to snipe his target up in a skyscraper. And there's this like large billboard advertisement. It's got like maybe a jellyfish in it, and that backlights the entire scene. And but also it prevents Bond from being able to stop the assassination because the light is shining in and giving him away. But after the assassination, Patrice and Bond have this like amazing hand-to-hand struggle, but all you can see are like their silhouettes cast against this advertisement, and it's gorgeous, and it's like the prettiest fight in the whole franchise. It's like probably a lot prettier than it has any business being. And then of course there's the scene where we're introduced to Raul Silva played by Javier Bardem. And it's one of the best of the whole series. He comes out of this elevator and delivers this great speech about how to get rats off of an island, trapping them and forcing them to cannibalize each other. And it's done in one long continuous take, and he starts at one end of the room and he strolls closer and closer to the camera delivering the speech, and it's a beautiful shot, a great performance, and a great piece of writing, all coming together to form something really memorable and dynamic. And that's the kind of stuff that Skyfall does that you don't really get in any other Bond movie. Most Bond movies are just point the camera and capture what's Bond doing. It's very rare. They're really trying to compose shots to be gorgeous. And I want to touch on this too. A lot of people, one thing they don't like about this movie is it gives Bond an anchored origin story, right? He actually is James Bond from so and so. And I admit that I kind of like the idea of Bond being a moniker anyone could take on, but clearly, say again?
Like a code name that goes with 007?
Yeah, exactly. When you're 007, you are James Bond. Anyone is it. And I think we learned in the case of the People versus Casino Royale that multiple people taking on the name James Bond isn't a good idea.
This was established.
It doesn't work, and it's not very effective.
Your Honor,
but the Craig's.
I would like to absolutely agree with the defense.
Thank you.
You cannot pass the name around. James Bond is a guy. Just feel like outside of the. I feel that outside of the amazing visuals by Roger Deakins, and they are amazing. It's a gorgeous film. To me, the biggest issues with this film are in fact narrative. They are not really directorial or physical, or certainly from the cinematography perspective. It's certainly the prettiest Bond film of all. It is entirely its narrative problems that bother me.
Well, I've touched on why I think Silva's plan is intentionally so contrived. It's because he wants to rub this in people's faces. He wants to show, I was ahead of you over and over. You fell into my trap like rats, right? I set my little oil drum and you kept coming in and you fell for it step by step because I'm so much smarter than all of you. And it turns out he is smarter than Q. And he is smarter than M, but it turns out he may be smarter than Bond, but Bond is just that good that he underestimates Bond, and it was his mistake to do that. That Bond is too tough. So,
Honor,
as far as Silva's
mini objection here, is anybody else bothered by the lack of the mano-a-mano conflict between Bond and Silva in this film? I mean, they set up this guy as kind of the dark image of Bond, and what happens at the end? Bond friggin' stabs him in the back with a knife, and that's it. You did not want to see a fight between those two guys, maybe back outside with a fire raging or something. Come on. Who ends the movie with stabbing the dude in the back? It's so anticlimactic.
My favorite Bond villains can't go toe-to-toe with Bond. They are the intellectuals. They're the thinkers. That's why a heavy exists. Jaws is supposed to go fist to fist with Bond. Oddjob is, Stamper from Tomorrow Never Dies. They're supposed to go toe-to-toe with Bond physically. It's Silva is the kind of guy who's supposed to think out his plans, like that bad guy from Tomorrow Never Dies. He's he can't punch anyone. As soon as Bond actually catches him, he's fucked. A Goldfinger. If Bond ever got it, once Bond gets his hands on Goldfinger, it's a short fight. They have a little scuffle in a plane, and it's not long because he's a chubby little dude who gets sucked out of a plane. Drax from Moonraker, the bad guy from Spy Who Loved Me. Ultimately, the ultimate biggest villain, Blofeld, can't throw a punch to save his life. He can't fight Bond. That's why he has a whole organization of people to fight for him.
Well, Your Honor, a slight objection here. There are certainly James Bond villains primary villains who are physically capable, like 006 from Skyfall, or
Yeah.
Sanchez from License to Kill. There are, in fact, or
Robert
even to some
Davi.
extent, Robert Davi or Christopher Walken, for that matter.
I was actually going to mention Christopher Walken is not physically capable. It's Mayday who can fight James Bond, but Walken is like on a blimp. They have a small scuffle, and Walken gets his ass kicked.
He does,
He
does
can't.
get his ass
He can't.
kicked, but isn't he like a product of some kind of old Soviet super soldier program, essentially? Like there was wasn't there a point
Yes,
where
he's
like doesn't he,
I
like,
think it was
show
Nazis.
great
It was actually
strength?
Nazis.
Well, the Nazis were brought in by the Russians, and then they were brought in by the Americans, and everybody just used some of that old.
But I
Nazi
think
magic
he had been a.
for their process.
I think he had been a German.
Okay, order in the court. We'll have to let the jury know whether the person in this.
Why should the jury be able to decide if he was German or not? I'm telling you, he was German. This is not an opinion.
The scientist was German. I believe that it was the Soviets who actually had that program, and they are the ones who planted.
Those movies are not on trial here, sir. I'm about to hold you in contempt.
Okay, but I love A View to a Kill.
A View to a Kill is so good. My apologies, Your Honor. I got a little overexcited. You could see how excited I am by James Bond, and I am disappointed that there was not a good like Daniel Craig versus friggin' Javier Bardem fight. Come on, that was such a letdown, man. Those two guys are badasses. That would be a good fight. I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity, and the movie was kind of long anyway. You're telling me they couldn't have cut some of that Moneypenny banter to have like a 35-second fight, please?
Objection, Your Honor. If I'm going to cut anyone from this movie, will not be Moneypenny.
The objection is sustained. We need Moneypenny. Prosecution, let's hear your closing argument, please.
Well, in summary, honorable gentlemen of the court, Skyfall, I think, is a film that endlessly undermines its own sense of seriousness with needless contrivances and gaping plot holes. While there are superficial elements of the film that I appreciate, like the cinematography by Roger Deakins and even Adele's theme song, I kind of like. Narratively, it's a train wreck, pun fully intended there. It's a magic trick that gives us the surface of a good film, a couple of nice scenes, as mentioned earlier, but on further examination, it's nothing but a house of cards, and it's a house that just doesn't hold up. And the more I watch it, the less I like it.
All right, and the defense's closing argument.
Your Honor, gentlemen and Bond girls of the jury.
Where?
Can you believe the pair of thunderballs on this guy over here? He has the audacity to point his accusatory gold finger at this film like some kind of Dr. Know-It-All. I don't know about you, but his words left me feeling shaken, but not in the least bit stirred. So when you enter that jury room, don't you dare octopussy out on me. Remember what I, the man with the golden puns, have told you, and vote for this film to live and let die. You only live twice, folks, and this is no time to die, because diamonds are forever and the world is not enough. Moonraker! Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Members of the jury, Mr. Schlender, Mr. From Russia with Ryan Rodriguez, and the man with the body that women fear and men crave. Mr. Haslar, you have heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
Let's see. Dylan, why don't you start?
All right. Well, what a great case. That's one of the reasons I love sitting in on this courtroom, because we get a very interesting line of argumentation from Mr. Shane about a movie that is pretty universally recognized, to be good, as not, or at least not bad. And Mr. Maynard did a very admirable job defending it. I think one of the things, that Mr. Shane kept talking about was kind of the incongruity of the movie. It's like you have like the Bond fantasy, but then you have this realism. And I feel when I was watching it, and even watching Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and then capping it off with Skyfall, viewing this as trilogy is like that tension was kind of the point. We're seeing, how does Bond exist in a post Cold War era? Like the post war era is over, but now we're in the post Cold War as well. And the Bond franchise kind of struggled with that. They almost had like a empty foxhole kind of syndrome here, and until the the new millennium here, we had like the 9/11 terrorist attacks, that changed the game. And so it was this idea of, like Em was talking about in her parliamentary hearing, our enemies are in the shadows now. But it wasn't even just the 9/11 paradigm shift. As we went further into the 21st century, then we did start seeing the rise in these kind of cyber attacks that Javier Bardem was talking about, where he's talking about, it's like, oh, manipulate stock prices here, done, 3 clicks of a keyboard. So these constantly evolving threats. I mean, if you think about how we viewed the Soviet Union as a threat, it was basically from the end of World War II all the way to the 90s. And then if you think about how we viewed state-sponsored terrorism, like from 9/11, then it only takes like 10 years, which is the blink of an eye. It's 2 sentences in a history book to get to this cyber espionage age. And so the question is, does the gentleman spy still have a role here? Does James Bond still have a role in this new world? And I feel these movies do a good job of actually trying to address that. And I feel that discomfort that people like Mr. Shane are feeling is entirely the point. And I think it's a message that is very well delivered by these films.
That's it's interesting that you frame it as kind of a reaction to the real world, because I look at these, especially these first 3 Craig Bonds, as more of a reaction to other movies. Because you have, after the first Pierce Brosnan movie, Goldeneye, then you have Austin Powers come out, which is a like wholehearted parody of James Bond. And then James Bond at the same time is getting increasingly stupid and increasingly unbelievable. And it gets to a point where the audience eventually says, okay, we're kind of done. And they have to reboot it with Daniel Craig. And even he, when they started making Casino Royale, the first thing he said was, Austin Powers fucked us. Like, you have to completely reinvent that character. I mean, I don't think he meant literally fuck them, because I don't think I don't think Austin Powers is capable of fucking a movie. But I mean, he probably could.
If
I don't know.
could.
I don't know him that well, but
He's a
I mean, he
sexy
does
bitch.
get down with a
He
lot
would
of people.
shag it.
That's right. He would shag it. Precisely. And so you have that. And then you have, in the early 2000s, you have the Jason Bourne movies, which I think these Daniel Craig movies specifically are kind of like a refutation of those movies, with the hyper-cutting, you cover up that an actor's not an actual stuntman because you can shoot it with 3 cameras and make 20 edits, and it looks like there's a fist fight happening, but really it's just edited together. Whereas this
Quantum of Solace particularly did that.
That is true, yeah. But like, if you look at like Casino Royale with that 20-minute, it feels like 20 minutes, that chase scene that goes all the way up to like the moving platforms like in the sky, it's all about kind of establishing long shots and making you feel like those are actual people pulling those things off. And they did that by, like, the guy he's chasing after is a free runner. And with Skyfall, I think it's kind of like the peak of all that stuff, in that if you asked me maybe 2 weeks ago what I thought of Skyfall, I would have told you it was my favorite Bond movie. Like, probably bar none. I don't really think that's the case anymore, simply because of the things that the prosecution brought up in terms of the plot is absolutely ridiculous and makes not a single lick of sense. But at the same time, it's kind of like it's a throwback, but it's also modern, and it has that aesthetic, that Roger Deakins, oh my God, one of the greatest looking films I have ever seen in my life.
Oh,
and I had the pleasure of seeing this in IMAX when it came out, and good God, this thing is fucking beautiful.
Especially like Shanghai. That whole sequence is just gorgeous. Breathtaking.
So Big Ben, I'm pointing to real world events. Ryan's pointing to other movies. Where are you coming down? How are you looking at this movie here?
I try to let the movie sort of speak for itself. I'm not really gonna go outside of that, although it is within continuity of the other Bond films. So yeah, as Mr. Rodriguez says, it's visually stunning. It's the best looking Bond film there is. I'm very, very certain of that. I love Silva and his motivations being sort of a mirror of Bond. I think that that's very interesting. I do like that his motivations are a bit smaller in scope compared to like a nuclear bomb. We've seen that sort of thing a lot. But there are those plot contrivances, and they do bug me every time. Like the bullet, particularly, it's like you couldn't have given this script another draft, to like think of something that's like a better jumping point to get Bond there. And the Aston Martin, like I get why it's there. It's sort of fan service. But I do roll my eyes a bit at like where did this thing come from?
Oh, this movie is chock full of fan service. I mean, the fact that Moneypenny doesn't give her name until the end of the movie is kind of like, huh? Get it?
I hated
She's
that
a
too.
character in the other movie, huh? It's like, yeah, I understand. I've seen movies before.
Like Q's invention is radio, though. That's I thought that was pretty great that they brought that twice.
Actually, I want to point out too, like, how did they not hear those helicopters coming? I mean, they just show up, like surprise helicopters. I think some of the plot problems that we see, and I'm not going to say that they aren't problems, and I'm not going to try to ameliorate them and wipe them all away, but I do think that's part of the point, is that when you're trying to force some of this James Bond stuff into the real world, it does cause this discomfort that it doesn't quite line up the way it should. It doesn't feel right. And I think that is really ultimately the point. I think when Skyfall is asking the question, is there room for James Bond? The answer becomes only in the movies, not in the real world. There was a time in our history where like a Roger Moore, debonair gentleman spy, they did exist. There was like Alan Dulles, there was William Stevenson. I mean, there were these gentleman spies that existed in the post-war period, and Bond was kind of the ultimate image of them. Ian Fleming had a background in intelligence, so that
think
was
like the next franchise should be Q.
No, well, I mean,
God, if it's Ben Whishaw, hell yes. Give me some of those movies.
Q was that was a very believable Q. That is what Q would look like today, but your field agents don't look like James Bond. They don't look like Ian Fleming's James Bond. So when Mr. Shane was saying like this isn't Ian Fleming's James Bond, it's like because he can't exist outside of movies. So it was this weird blend of what we're actually seeing in real life, and then how would that work in a James Bond movie? And then ultimately we're just left with the idea of like it works in the movies.
And plus that world that James Bond belonged to doesn't exist anymore. It didn't really exist at the time. It kind of like the underlying things in there, the concerns kind of existed, but he was always a fantasy character. He always existed in a fantasy world, and I mean,
they're thwarted by YouTube. That's where like you're literally watching YouTube where the video of all the agents' names and things come out, and that's something that actually happens to intelligence officials when that like can actually happen. Like their identities can get leaked by almost anyone, anywhere. You know what I mean? Like we had that. Yeah, it's something that happens, and James Bond, as he is, as a gentleman spy, is incredibly poorly equipped to address that. But that's what Skyfall, it gives us that euphoric release of saying, but you know what? He can still kick a lot of ass. Maybe that's not how it's working out there in the real world. Maybe the agents are looking more like this new kind of nerdy looking Q, and less like your Daniel Craig's, but it still works in the movies. And I really
time to WikiLeak.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a big takeaway. Not just from Skyfall, but if you take Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and Skyfall as a trilogy, I can't speak to Spectre or the one that's going to come out after that because I haven't seen it. But as a complete trilogy, looking at how field operatives have to work in the 21st century, and you do that through the prism of James Bond, I think it's very brilliant. I think it's very well received, and I really respect a lot of the things that Mr. Shane had to say. And I hate the cop out of like, but that's kind of the point. But I just feel like this level of discomfort that he was feeling, I think that's what makes it effective. And I think that's what you were supposed to feel. So I am very comfortable saying not guilty.
Okay. Something that I thought was interesting that I wanted to bring up just briefly. So when Craig was rebooted, it was kind of because the Brosnan movies had gotten increasingly stupid. is
He
the
had an
word.
invisible car in the last one.
Yeah, it gets pretty bad.
Empty foxhole syndrome. It's like Heartbreak Ridge, like these movies where they were struggling and reaching for an enemy. I mean, we in the 90s we had the peace dividend, you know what I mean? Like there wasn't a lot of room for James Bond. I mean, GoldenEye, he has to fight another super secret agent, because and then he has in Tomorrow Never Dies, it's like it's the media, and it's very interesting kind of ideas, but like
right. That wasn't really my point though. My point was, so the people that wrote those Pierce Brosnan movies also wrote these Daniel Craig movies. And so at that point I have to wonder, so what is the difference? If it's the exact same people making these movies, not just the producers, not just, creative personnel, but the people who literally put words on the page, like what actually separates these two eras? What makes them different?
Well, their intent does. I mean, they didn't write an invisible car in these movies.
Right, but like they didn't intentionally write a stupid movie with Die Another Day. They just wrote a stupid movie. But how does it like then become suddenly like well written? Like I don't understand how that actually works.
Well, because they had much more salient things to draw off of. That's been my whole point this whole time. The 21st century represented things that
right, but like Casino Royale, I mean, it revolves around a guy who wants to play cards. Like that's like the big thing.
Yeah, it's setting up though the next two movies too, though, if you view them as a trilogy.
Well, but they didn't know that at the time.
Oh,
they didn't actually plan out. No, they didn't. They never plan anything out. They know the next title sometimes, maybe back in like the 60s or the 70s, because it would be in the credits. But with this, it was, oh, please God, let this make money. For the love of God, please. Daniel Craig better be good. Oh, please, 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 please. It did. And then Quantum of Solace got made, and then that's how it trickled out. Because Daniel Craig, at the end of every production, goes, that's the last fucking one I'm going to do. And talks about it for 2 months and says, I'd rather cut my wrists before I come back as James Bond. And then they say, they say, Daniel, we have $70 million for you. He goes, okay, all right, so we'll be back here in 2 years.
He did Cowboys and Aliens, okay? So, like, let's not take Daniel Craig too seriously when he talks about his project choices, all right?
And combining the stuntman and actor as one, instead of stuntman does amazing stunt, let's film it from 5 miles away and make it look like it's Sean Connery. Now it's Tom Cruise literally willing to kill himself for a shot.
Right. God bless him.
I hope he does it. I mean, I really hope he gets a shot. That's what I meant. I hope nothing happens to Tom Cruise. I hope nobody harms a hair on his head. He's an angel. I love him. So Dylan, you're not guilty.
I'm pretty firm.
Ben, what are you thinking?
I am also not guilty. The only thing I wish they would have done is edit it down to be a little shorter and a little tighter. But that's about it. And I wish they would have given the script another draft for the Bullet and the Aston Martin, things like that. But it's a not guilty. That's not enough to drag it all the way down.
Okay. So I still love this movie, although I don't love it nearly as much as I did before. But to be fair, because all of the things that the prosecution raised, I think, are valid, I don't want this to pass as a unanimous not guilty. So I'm going to vote guilty.
God bless
all right.
you.
Fair enough.
God bless you, sir.
All right. Let's do this shit.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus Skyfall, we find the accused not guilty of being a bad movie.
The verdict is so rendered. However, this court would like to issue a stern warning to No Time to Die to be more like Skyfall and less like Spectre, or it will find itself in this court in the future. Court is adjourned.
Hello, this is foreign correspondent Con Shonery from the Gabagoo Gazette. Mr. Shane, a tough loss for you today. Come on over and tell me about it.
Well, sir, I can only say that I am disappointed by the verdict, of course. I worked very hard to prove the inferiority of Skyfall, but ultimately it stands as a pretty hard film to discredit. I do have to say that my main points about it have some validity, I feel, and I do feel should be taken into consideration when placing Skyfall in the context of the rest of the series. People that are honestly believe Skyfall is the best film of the series, or one of them, should consider some ridiculous plot points and potholes of that sort that I have delineated in my prosecution. But thank you guys. Thank you for having me. It was a blast. I enjoyed it, and perhaps I could maybe prosecute Citizen Kane or some other
Hell yes.
in the future. Something
Wow.
like that. Maybe we can do that.
Well, that sounds like a great exclusive for the Gabagoo Gazette. Okay, Mr. Maynard,
Yes.
how are you doing today?
Feeling good. How are you doing?
Oh, well, just a little tired from my flight. I came all the way from Scotland for this damn trial.
It seems like a lot of work. I'm happy that we got the verdict that we did, and it looks like I'm the last rat standing.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Gonna kick it back now to the boys in the studio.
The hell you think you're doing, you boggin' dauber? Poorly done Scottish accent is my bit. Get out! Get out, you bombot!
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy this.
Come on!
Come on!
Haggis.
No!
What's up there?
Oh.
All right, that was a great one. That was terrific.
Yeah.
What a good trial.
Good show. Good show. Well argued, Shane. It's very, very hard to take on a movie like that, and you did it with grace and aplomb.
I was not optimistic about my chances, gentlemen, but I tell you, it just bugs the hell. Those little things just bug the shit out of me every time I watch that film. And usually, like with James Bond movies, it's
bug
kind of
me a little bit too.
It's candy for me usually, like usually I'll just buy anything, oh, he's on a gondola, okay, whatever. Oh, he's swinging through the jungle like Tarzan.
Oh, he's
that
pretending to be
was a little
Japanese?
rough.
That's all right.
Oh, Jesus. That was ridiculous. And God, that was an
What a
insane
great
decision.
movie that was.
That series is just chock full of insane choices and options, and boy,
That's why I love the Bond franchise, though. I mean, it's just stupid action, and it's just like hyper masculinity all the way through. Drinking and guns and fast women and faster cars, and
That's what I hate about them. The masculinity part. Because I don't like masculinity. I'm not a big fan
I
of it.
understand that. Then you shouldn't watch the movies, though. Like, I mean, no one should be tying you down to and making you watch the movies.
My
Ryan,
father did.
and tickling your feet as they do. That's
My
not
father
something.
didn't tickle my feet, sir. I tickled
Okay.
my own feet.
James Bond is to you what football is to me.
Okay.
And the
It's also
Bond
what
movies are
football
always
is to me,
long,
man.
and they're always long too. Like they're always 2+ hours.
yeah, I'm
Quantum of
wondering,
Solace. Quantum of Solace is like
Yeah.
an hour 40. I don't know how that's possible,
it's
but
the
it is.
shortest. It's the
I
shortest.
like Quantum of
Bond film.
Solace a lot more when you watch it right after Casino Royale.
Yeah, that's the way to watch it.
That's kind of like that was kind of why it didn't make as much money as Casino Royale at the time, because they literally built it in that it takes place seconds later, and people, I guess, didn't really remember it or care that
It was
much.
like 2 years later or something.
That's how fickle the public is, man. That's how fickle they are. But I think that time will be kind to Quantum of Solace. Time will be very kind to that movie. Even the bad guy that
very
looks like
much
Roman
agree.
Polanski. Even that's okay.
I do it.
Totally agree with you. Yeah, that movie's better than people think, and the action is cracking in that.
Yes.
It just moves very quickly, and the plot actually makes sense. There's not a lot of holes in it, and also he doesn't get the girl at the end of this one either. So it's like they've kind of establishing the pattern. Well, I mean, he almost never gets the girl, right? I mean, the only time he gets the girl is in
When she
Spectre.
tries to kill him.
I mean, like, he gets
Spectre,
married in
kind of
Honor Her
gets the
Majesty's
girl-
Secret Service. But then
Yeah, but he
dies.
doesn't get to keep the girl.
Yeah, I know, but still, he gets married. That's a big thing.
So, Andre, when you first saw Skyfall, did you not like it, or did you say like, "Yeah, something's not right here," and then it was like watching it once or twice more that really cemented it for you?
Well, I saw some holes on it the first time I saw it. I did like it because, again, Quantum was I didn't hate Quantum, but it was a little bit of a letdown after Casino Royale, and I wasn't sure where the series was going. It felt like, I wanted more. I wanted Bond to be Bond in Casino Royale more. I felt like there was too much of him like working up to being Bond. So they get to the end of the Casino Royale, and then they go into the next film right away. So there's basically 2 movies where Daniel Craig is not quite James Bond. So in Skyfall, I felt that was the first movie that he felt totally like James Bond. And you brought up a theory earlier about the concept that between Quantum of Solace and Skyfall, he had all these other adventures. So maybe there was a Goldfinger in there somewhere, right?
I would exactly
Or Thunderball, you know, and
Mhm.
like he became that guy. But
Exactly.
since they didn't really, it wasn't really referenced in any way because obviously they're not going to do that.
Well, it might
felt
have
a
been
little-
slightly referenced, right? With the car, with the ejector seat.
The car, for sure. Yeah.
You know?
Well, the car, but it was referenced only in a knowing wink, wink to the people that have seen Goldfinger. I mean, how many movies does the general public even watch from like 1964, guys? It's so rare. You know, there's really a handful of films that like people of a certain age are even aware of from that period of time. You know what I mean? So the fact that Bond movies are still in the zeitgeist kind of says a lot about like the power of the series, whatever it is. Whether, you know, everybody has different things they like in Bond movies. You know, a lot of women like them because the guys are attractive and like know how to do everything. And like, you know, it's like, hey, I bet if I could ask Bond to, you know, install some nice shelves, he'd be great at that. And he would.
James
Totally
Bond could fix
would.
your
He
dishwasher
wouldn't do it in his own apartment.
without any
He would do it for
problem.
us.
No problem, right? I mean,
Yeah.
once you give him a lot of sex, he would do all of that stuff.
And
it's
I would.
hard.
Give him so much sex.
So
Oh,
no,
boy.
he would leave.
He would not have, oh my God, he would just have the time of his life with all the sex I would give him.
All the sex
Oh.
you're gonna throw at him. That's sexually ravenous Ryan Rodriguez.
Yeah,
that's him,
that's me.
folks.
Can't
That's
go
me,
one
baby.
episode without talking about Ryan's sex life.
No,
Jesus.
we can't. So Andre, besides hearing about Ryan's sex life, what has been keeping you busy lately during these unprecedented times?
Oh my God, guys, it's been ridiculous like everything else. But I've had a podcast for several years, so we just kind of started a new season. It's called Film Driven. We like to call it the most dangerous
Great show.
podcast on the air, where me and my partner Steve Haskin literally drive around and talk about various aspects of film history and present. We really like to get philosophical, but we like to talk about genres and kind of bigger topics rather than just review what is coming out at the time, which thank God right now because it's a complete mess. So we're just starting a new season on the 1980s. Episode 2 actually just posted today. That's on the action films of the 80s, and of course everybody's got their favorites. And episode 1 is up from last week, and that's on Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And by today, you mean 3 weeks ago, right?
That is true. This will air 3 weeks later. So,
Absolutely.
but you can check those episodes out. They'll still be out there, Ben.
They should. Well, we got a lot of good ones coming, and finally, I think we actually have time to sit around and record a lot of content because back when there was a lot of work and things were super busy, we didn't have as much time on our hands. So it's the pandemic has been a weird blessing in disguise to our creative process.
But now, controversial take here. You're not driving anymore now, right?
Yeah, we can't drive. Well, we're afraid of being in too close of a contact with each other. Actually, that's we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and still recording it in person. We record it kind of movie style with lavalier mics and stuff like that because that's our technical background and so forth.
But you both have to go into your garage and sit in the car because that's like the central piece of it, right?
I was going to say you could get a sound effect of a car driving and just put that under you.
That is very, very true. And, honestly, we don't want to do that. We don't want to misrepresent ourselves. It's funny because like throughout the history, we started doing this thing, like I think in 2008, like when not a lot of people were even doing podcasts, right? And we'd have all these weird, we got stopped by police, we'd get stopped by Neighborhood Watch. Like, what are you guys doing? Driving around here with headphones on, like with weird antennas sticking out. It was strange to people, and it's funny. And we would record all of these encounters. We'd keep the the digital tape rolling, so to speak,
Mhm.
and so we have some funny conversations
With special guest Officer Steve.
Oh no, officer!
Oh,
It's
no.
just
But,
just a microphone.
I do agree that I do hate podcasts that misrepresent themselves, which is why we have our multi-million-dollar courtroom studio facility that we record from every week, because the
We attend
authenticity,
via iPad on rollers.
the authenticity is so important to us.
We're all
to the
wearing
process.
robes. We
Yes.
gotta make sure we have those robes on, and we're all wearing
am.
those wigs from
You look
Parliament.
fantastic,
Yes, those big powdery wigs.
Yes.
We wear those
Yeah.
every week.
I mean, I wear them all day, just for style
Yeah.
purposes, but also for this recording.
Mine's made of toilet paper rolls, which is funny.
Got so many, you know what I mean?
Got
I
so
bought,
many.
tons of that shit.
So that's great. So Andre, do you have a recommendation for our listeners for a movie you think they should see?
Oh boy, I got tons of recommendations. I'm gonna go off the total like Bond thing and get a little more wonky. Like everything is getting released on Facebook now, right? Not Facebook. What am I saying? Sorry, cut that out. Everything's getting released on Netflix or Amazon or whatever.
Or Facebook.
Whatever streaming service. Yeah, stuff's not getting released on Facebook. You can leave it in. It's fine. That's fine.
When we have to.
Damn it. I've just undermined my entire case and now seem like a complete fucking idiot. Okay, boomer,
No,
Facebook.
You're good. Don't worry about it. You're
I'm
good.
Generation X. I'm gonna.
You're good. We love you. Don't worry about it.
But no, but I really like the film that came out on Netflix about a month ago called "I'm Thinking of Ending Things." It's a Charlie Kaufman movie. The guy who did Being John Malkovich and Adaptation. He's a weirdo, and his movies are weird. And this one is kind of weird too, but it's weird in a good way. And I really, really appreciate like what he's doing. Like when you see that movie, you're gonna go like. You may not necessarily love it, but you're not going to think of another movie that does what that movie does. And that's kind of cool in this day and age. You know, it seems like everything's been done a million times. You see something on Netflix and it's kind of like, whoa, I've never seen that before. That's kind of nice. I'm Thinking of Ending Things on Netflix.
All right,
Real
cool.
Cool.
I'll check that one out. And who do we have next is Big Ben. What do you got for recommendation for us this week?
Well, I enjoy the Bond films. Mission Impossible is actually my favorite spy series. Ryan hit on why I like them a lot in Deliberation. They're fun. Tom Cruise is doing his own stunts, and that just brings that extra realism and intensity to it. My favorite of the bunch that I'm going to recommend is Rogue Nation. But while you're at it, you should follow that up with Fallout. The bad guy that they have in the two is very intense. And as long as Tom Cruise is willing to strap himself to a plane, I'll pretty much be watching these movies.
Right,
Love them. Love them. Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible does Bond better than Bond does Bond these days, in my opinion.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, they have like 6 films, and I still love them. I mean, how rare is that?
It would be cool to see Superman fight Bond, though. I would watch that. That would be.
Well, the Superman might be Bond. You know.
Oh, that would be sweet too.
Yeah, Henry Cavill is like one of the top runners.
But he's the Witcher right now.
That's right.
Ryan, what kind of recommendation do you got for us?
So I had to think of something weird because my legion of fans demands it.
That one.
So, no, legion.
Thanks, Mom.
So on the topic of spy movies, I have two. I'm sorry, Rob, but I have two.
God damn it.
First is speaking of Superman, Guy Ritchie's The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which is awesome. It's not like streaming anywhere free at the moment, but you can rent it on Amazon. It is, if you've only seen the previews, it was terribly marketed. It is not the piece of crap that you think it is. It is kind of subversive. It is edited in kind of like a psychedelic fashion. I love it dearly. But my other recommendation is Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. Speaking of Charlie Kaufman, he wrote this spy movie based on Chuck Barris's autobiography. And Chuck Barris was the host of The Gong Show, and he wrote an autobiography.
You're out of time, Ryan. I hit the gong. Gong!
Thank you. And he wrote an autobiography in which he purported to reveal that he was an assassin for the CIA. That's not true, clearly. But if he wants to think that it is, and it makes a movie like Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, then I'm fucking here for it. I love it. It's on HBO Max at the moment.
I love that
All right.
one too, man. Love that one too. Both of those, actually.
Dylan, what do you got for us?
Well, it's a movie I've talked about before, but I'm finally making an official recommendation, and it kind of keeps in touch with the spy themes, Cold War, and that's 2006, The Lives of Others. It is just quite simply one of the best movies ever made. It might even be my favorite movie. It's about in East Germany, a guy is spying on a potentially subversive writer, and it all goes from there. It's just everything about that movie's simply beautiful, and it's such a great window into that Cold War world. Decidedly colder than what you would get from a Bond movie. So it's just absolutely a brilliant movie.
Chilly.
I don't know if it's streaming on anything, but honestly, you should just buy it because I guarantee you'll watch it at least 3 times.
Yeah,
I thought I saw it on Amazon Prime, but I can't confirm that. But I'm pretty sure.
And 2006 Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film as well. So I mean, it's got the accolades to back it up. It's just such a great movie.
It beat out Chocolat too. Chocolat 2.
Electric Boogaloo, right?
Yes, Judgment Day. Actually, it was Chocolat 2, Judgment Day. So my recommendation, I'm going to break the mold here by recommending a Bond movie, and I'm going to recommend 1963's From Russia with Love, because I love From Russia with Love. I didn't really like it much as a kid because it's not, it doesn't have like flying cars and jetpacks and stuff like that. But as I've grown older, I've grown more fond of it. And so if you want to see Sean Connery basically go mano a mano with a young and gorgeous Robert Shaw, this is the movie. So gorgeous. This is the movie for you. And if you're a big Jaws fan like I am, it's my favorite movie. And you just want to see what Quint looks like when he's young. Like Grant is quite a specimen, and it's a great
I've got the
movie.
vapors right now. Like
Exactly.
seriously.
I've given Ryan the vapors. And a lot of the stuff from Austin Powers is really plucked from Russia with Love.
They played the hell out of that Bond theme while he's just like walking around the hotel room checking behind pictures for bugs.
Yeah, and it's a great one, and it's really the kind of one of the quintessential kind of spy feeling movies. It feels very spy. It feels very Cold War-y, even more so than The Lives of Others. So if you really want to see a very Cold War-y style spy flick, check out From Russia with Love.
Yeah,
with Ryan Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a very small cameo. You won't notice me, but I'm in the background in one of the hotel scenes.
You're one of the bugs. I knew it.
I was there for a day, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And I got to see Robert Shaw, and oh my God, he's so handsome in person.
And with that, we are all out of time. Andre, thank you so much for joining us. We had a great time talking with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was super fun. Let's do it again.
Yes, we absolutely will. Would love to have you back. You did a terrific job bashing a movie that is very hard to bash. So that is hard to do.
It was fun.
And with that, we are all out of time, but please join us next time as the reels of justice keep turning.
Count it.
You know what, Ben? Fine. Go ahead. Count it. I don't care anymore.
Bye-bye.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.